So what is content marketing and why do brands use it to great success? Take a look around you and you'll see brands taking content marketing seriously. Tesco, Waitrose, easyJet, British Airways, the BBC, Rover and Levi's. They're all doing it. And did you know the Michelin guide and their coveted stars is an absolute classic piece of content marketing? We chat about it all today in episode 33 of the Employer Content Marketing Pod. And who better to join me than Rob John from the Content Marketing Association. The CMA is the industry association for marketing, publishing, advertising and social agencies. And Rob is the CMA's Managing Director. We talk about what content marketing is, why brands should use it, and what content marketing looks like. Let's get on with the chat. Hi Rob, how you doing?
Yeah, very good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for joining. I know you're busy. You guys have been super busy with your webinars, up to 160 now, you said?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy year, but I think it's the awards early bird has just kind of closed, so I've got a bit more free time now. So I was really happy to come and join you. I know it's been a while. We've been talking about getting on the pod.
Oh, brilliant! No, it's good. Yeah, it's good to get you on board. Let's start off with just a bit of an intro about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Rob. I'm the Managing Director of the Content Marketing Association. Been with the CMA now for 3 years. It'll be next month, actually. So 3 years this summer is when I've been with the CMA, and it's been brilliant. I was brought in as to sort of look after the members and make sure that our members were sort of always kept up to date with what was going on in the content industry. And it's been an amazing 3 years. I've met some amazing people, learned so much. And I think one of the great things about the CMA is that we're super agile. So we speak to our members all the time. And, these webinars have been sort of showed in the real world. When you put physical events on, it's a lot harder to, if you said to me, hey, Rob, do you want to put an event on around, how to do this type of thing in SEO or how to do this, how to make a podcast? It's almost difficult to find a venue, then market it and make sure people will turn up. Whereas now, because it's all virtual, it's kind of like, yeah, we can do that in 2 weeks. We've already got a massive audience who can come to it. So it's almost made it a bit easier. But for those of you who don't know what the CMA is, so we're a not-for-profit that is the Content Marketing Association, sort of looking to grow the content industry both in the UK and across the world, really. Been going for longer than this, but in 10 years ago, we changed it to the Content Marketing Association. We used to be the Association of Publishing Agencies.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
So that was that. So we had a lot of, and that changed. Then we had, and because of the number of people we had creating content, not just in that industry, we sort of branched out. And now we're lucky to have members all across the world, from agencies to publishers to freelance. We've got in-house now who are part of it. So it's really changed a lot over the last 10 years.
Nice. How many members do you have now then, roughly?
It's quite difficult because we've got our membership is slightly different because we have one, say, member, but they might have 50 people in their team who are members.
Sure, yeah,
but actually members, we'd probably close to 200 now.
Nice.
And again, that's businesses rather than individuals.
Okay, lovely. And what reason why I wanted to get you on is because I think this podcast talks about employer marketing through a content marketing lens, and I've dedicated a short episode of me talking about what content marketing is and how it's relevant and necessary for employer marketing, employer branding. And of course, in each episode, we do refer back to content marketing and talk about examples of content marketing. But I thought, given I'm up to I think 31 episodes now, it's a good chance to have another episode dedicated to it. And who better to have than yourself, Rob, to really talk about it. So there's lots of definitions on the web about content marketing, and anyone can look at that, but it's like in kind of your view when you're talking to people, what is content marketing?
Well, I think obviously, as you said, you can Google it, and they all kind of say things around creating clear, having a defined audience, and having something that engages and educates people. And again, we can, the CMA, we have a definition of it and that. But when I speak to friends of mine who don't really understand content marketing, they ask, "What is it that you do?" I kind of liken it to the gym. If you run, if you run downstairs or if you run down to the shop, that's running. But if you go to the gym with an actual view and a strategy behind it, and you say, right, I'm going to run 5K in 3 months or something, then that to me is content marketing. So that's the difference between content versus content marketing. You run down the stairs, that's content. You go to the gym and actually have a focus and a run for half an hour, or you've got a goal to go towards, that's content marketing. That's what I kind of say it as. And there might be people now who understand content marketing who might be able to pick holes in that, and I could probably agree with you. But when I'm speaking to people who don't really know the industry, I think that's something that's kind of been quite an easy way of displaying that, really.
Yeah, fair enough. Absolutely. It's content courses is so many things, everything, but actually it doesn't have any kind of focus, dedication, and consistency. There's no point doing it.
Absolutely, and I think that's the difference. I think the key part is the strategy and the reason behind it, and the kind of one-offness. You don't do the one-offness is a piece of content. You might create an infographic or you might create a podcast, but it's creating something consistently with an audience in mind. Because I think that is the one thing that will really help an audience. And there's so many examples of how content marketing has helped not just companies individually, but sectors and in different areas as well. So yeah, it's massive.
So why is it that, in your view, why is it that organizations need to use content marketing? You touched on some of it already, but
yeah, I think it's a way. I think in this day and age, I think there's more and more. I'm not. Everyone talks about purpose, and I'm not just going to throw that out sort of willy-nilly and being like purpose, but I'll back it up and say there's a lot of people out there now who are too scared to put their head above the parapet because they're like, oh God, social media will crucify us if we say we're going to plant trees, and then they find out that we don't plant trees, or they do that, whatever it is. And purpose doesn't have to obviously be always about kind of planting trees. But the example I give is it now content marketing allows people to have companies to have a voice and to kind of actually show what they do more than just we're doing this. If I'll give you an example, actually, one of our members, TCO London, they did work with Levi's, which won best partnerships at our awards last year, and it was incredible. Levi's wanted to do around they wanted to do a piece around gender and what masculinity looks like these days. And they didn't want to just say like, oh, we've got a guy in the fields, we've got a guy as a mechanic. They actually went out and found modern men, and they produced like a magazine, videos around, and they interviewed people all over the world, like what it likes to, and that is something that's a great piece of content that you would seek out regardless of who did it. It wasn't really like, it was obviously a really stylized piece because it was Levi's and it did really well. But then that allows Levi's to talk about these gender issues and stuff rather than just putting a pre-roll ad or a TV commercial or something out there, which is just like, hey, we do this. It's almost like so that's one reason why someone has to do content marketing now, because it shows what you stand for in more of a way than just putting out one piece of content once a year to show that you are doing this or you're doing that.
So true, actually, isn't it? Because that could easily just be get a few models in, and do the shoot, do the video shoot, do your campaign. You got your TVC sorted out. You got your assets for social, and that's it. Where actually, this is going back to your thing about the difference between running or going to the gym or having a focused plan, training plan. It's connected, and it's what you say. Absolutely, it's kind of something that people would be interested in consuming as well.
Yeah. And I think the biggest compliment as well you can have is, and I know some people say, you should never talk with the competitors, or you should always, but I think we're in a place now, especially with the digital nature of the world we live in, where if you can provide a value to someone, there's a good chance either they will use your services or they will tell us if they maybe can't afford your services, but they'll tell someone. And I do think there's absolutely that now where, we have got if you can create good content and you can create something that people actually want without throwing sales messages at them, because, there's that, I can't remember what it is now. It's probably changed a lot since we're all indoors, but remember that old sort of adage, which was you see 2,000 sales messages a day. There's a varying number from all the last sort of 10 years, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
So if you can get people who are actively searching for your content, then that can only be a good thing.
Absolutely, and it's this thing about kind of not starting with what do we want to sell. It's going, okay. That's the thing of audience. Although I actually say sometimes when I say audience, that makes me feel a little bit uneasy. And I might say do something about audience later on, actually, which is about do we assume that our audience is our audience? They're busy getting on with life. Are they waiting for us on the TV with no remote control? Or at a cinema, having to go through ads? No, they're doing that maybe, but they're also busy just getting on with life, scrolling through miles and miles of content on social. They're not necessarily waiting for you, dare I say, to be entertained by a brand.
Yeah, and you know what? That's one of the things, though. You're right, and I think that's where all of our members, I'm guessing, and the people who do content marketing well, obviously they have a defined audience and they do a lot of research into that. But you're absolutely right, because I mean, one of my kind of biggest bugbears that used to always be, we're going for the millennial or we're going for the Gen Z, and it's kind of like, well, you've just said like a fifth. I'm a millennial, but millennials now are up to, I think, like 44. I think is what they are right now. So anyone between the age of like 44 and 25, I think it is. That's a massive sort of gap there. You've got homeowners in there, you've got parents in there, you've got rent. So yeah, you're right. I think sometimes the term audience is thrown about a bit loosely, but I'd like to think if you're doing content really well, you have got a defined audience in mind.
Exactly. I think it's like often I kind of say that because I'm being maybe a little bit flippant about it, but I think briefs, I've seen so many briefs that start off with our audience, and that thing of audience suggests that they know about you and they're waiting to see what you've got to say, but they're not, they're busy. So which places even more importance on the people you want to engage with than to turn them into audience. And that's what I love about content marketing is create your own audience by coming up with that valuable content. Don't rely just on paid channels to buy that attention and maintain that attention each time. Treat yourself a bit like a media company.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's also a perfect way to I know every sort of part of the marketing mix can influence different parts of the funnel, but I think there's been examples of content in our awards, for example. The content is being used at the top of the funnel, all the way right down to the buying decisions, and not just the buying decisions, but how people buy at the point of sale as well. So I think it's one of those things that can be used throughout the whole journey, really.
Exactly. It's like a good example is, I think when I went to one of your events a couple of years ago, there was in the actual physical events magazine, seems like a long time ago, in the actual physical event magazine, there was an article about print and the role of print. Made me think that, absolutely, print still has a role to play. But actually, maybe you do that further down the line. When you've got people who are already connected with you, you then start to give them something that is kind of maybe high-end print, content that they will flip through and consume because they already know about you and are already engaged with your content and have a rapport with you. Absolutely, all stages.
And do you know what? Absolutely. And do you know what? The whole thing, print is dead, people have been saying for years and things. And I mean, there's no denying that print sales have dropped in terms of, newspapers. But in terms of publications, I mean, one of our members, Cedar, who won Agency of the Year last year, their Tesco magazine is read by like 5.2 million people every month. And it's the biggest sort of, most read consumer magazine in the UK, which is crazy. And I mean, so I don't think print is dead. Print has changed. And I'll give you an example. Actually, when I left university, I went to go and work for Global Radio, who are the UK's largest commercial radio. And one of the guys there was telling me, oh, he said, oh, radio's dying. He said, this is what they've been telling me for the last 25 years. He said, when I joined radio back in 1973 or whatever he told me it was, he said, ever since then, people have been telling me radio's on its way out. Yet we're still doing 23 million reach every, when the radars come out and stuff. And, there's arguments of if the radar is accurate, but, we'll leave that for a different conversation. But I think, so there's always people, even podcasts. I bet people have said, especially in lockdown, God, we don't need another podcast. But nobody says that about films or books. Nobody says to Waterstones, we've got enough books now, we don't need any more.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true, absolutely. And it's, there's always, so long as it's getting right for the audience, there was always someone who's going to be interested in that kind of content that you create. Just let's not leave it to luck, And so you just kind of talked about a couple of examples already, but I think, have you got any others that kind of spring to mind when you're talking to members or potential members about some kind of standout examples of using content marketing for an organisation?
I haven't got permission from them, so I'm not gonna name the brand in question. But we had an entry into last year's awards, and the brand had done research, and the agency had done research, and they'd found that there was a publication that ran alongside the company as obviously a piece of content marketing, and the research found that those customers who received and read the content, where they did have a print piece as well, but also engaged with print online, they spent on average 5.5 times more per year than those customers who didn't engage with the pieces of content they were doing. So that was a great example, and for me that was something I saw and thought, wow, because there's the argument of, well, yeah, because they're super fans, that's why they're spending more money. But isn't that what we want? don't we want people to become super fans of a company so they can shop or they can buy online? Or so that's for me was an incredible example. And we are in the process of talking to all of our award winners last year to not just run case studies, but to also host webinars on how to create great award-winning campaigns. So hopefully they'll give me the green light on that. But for now, they'll have to remain nameless, I'm afraid.
Oh, nice, that's really good. I mean, absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's you want people to become your super fans, because they're the ones that are more likely to buy from you, apply to you. Otherwise, you're just competing amongst all that white noise that's out there. Especially with online and social, it just means that actually there's one thing as much as we'd like one piece of content or an ad to grab someone's attention and make them make a decision there and then, it doesn't happen. Even with a great piece of, so was it Marriott Hotels did something a few years ago. I think it might be actually one of your case studies. I'm not sure, but they did a little drama which involved a bellboy and a romantic relationship between, I think, two guests. It's great, kind of cinematic quality content, and he wants to find out what happened to these characters. But even then, they won't be relying on just that one video to actually convert someone's attention into some sort of action. So yeah, as much as a creative team would love to have one piece of content to change someone's mind, it's not going to happen. So you do need that approach.
And also we know now that with the way Google works and the way the way search works now as well, people are searching for things, and everyone, whether they ultimately buy it from someone else, you've still influenced that sale. Okay, it hasn't affected your bottom line or anything just yet, but there's a good chance. For instance, if Nike do a blog on exercising, and I visit it twice a week, and then buy all my stuff from Adidas, that is something that's probably quite rare. And there's still a reason why I'm going to that Nike site every week to see what their fitness blog is doing. So yeah, someone might argue, but yeah, then Adidas are getting all their money. But it's kind of like, yeah, but one day, when there must be a reason why, maybe Nike is too expensive or whatever the reason is, but one day that will materialize in a sale. It's just, it's about kind of, that's another thing about content marketing. You can't do it in 3 months. you don't do content marketing in a short. It's an always on. It's something that you do forever and always.
And I don't know what you think about this, but I think what I find is definitely the long term is the way forward on it. You've got to have that, consistency, that cadence, drumbeat content, however you want to describe it. The way of I found the way of getting to that point is to go, right, well, let's at least start with something like a campaign and have a content marketing hat on that, and treat that, in a way that we want to continue with, start as we mean to go on. So addressing those content marketing principles to a campaign is something I think definitely really helps.
It also, and I mean, it also gives you license to do things on the fly as well. We spoke about it a little bit earlier on about, if you're someone who is steeped in a particular area, or if you've got a real focus on whether it's gender or whether it's the environment or whether it's just making people laugh or doing something funny, if that is your kind of purpose and you're creating content for that, if something pops up in the news then that's quite similar in that area, it allows you to jump on it instead of being, oh, look at those bandwagon people there, And it's almost like, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Ben and Jerry's have done so much work over the last few years around modern day slavery. So now, if they said something about that now, some people, the cynical online people that we all see on Twitter and across social media, if they jumped on Ben and Jerry's and, look at you're just trying to jump on the bandwagon, not that they have to kind of stick up for themselves, but they can say, well, hang on, look, we've been doing it for a lot. We've been living and breathing this, actually. So it gives people license to jump on these trends because it shows that they've got more than just, they're just trying to do it for a quick social win.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I look at it from an employer marketing, employer branding perspective. It's that proof is really important, because actually, there are enough ads out there, enough communications out there that are asking people to, be a better part of themselves or do their best work with us. Join a company that's innovating and doing new things, but actually, you've got to dig below that surface a lot more and see some substance there, and so that long-term view on things and that consistency is really, really important. That's for sure. You talked about running at the beginning, and then you talked about Nike. That's for me actually. So thinking about examples of content marketing. So people won't be able to see this, but I am dressed up, ready to run. I'm always like this, so that I have.
I can't believe you run naked. I can't believe you run naked. You're all dressed up, Rob, I can't believe you.
I told you to keep that quiet. When I do have clothes on, Rob, I'm like all ready to go. But I have the Nike running app, Nike Run Club.
Yeah.
And that for me is absolutely perfect piece of content marketing, because
absolutely
what Nike have done is they've gone, right, well, we are about helping people exercise and just getting on with it, and actually, having an app there that's going to help you with your guided training, or even just tracking your running, to make it more focused, is fantastic. And I'm actually wearing a gilet which is not Nike, but I think that's because it was a Secret Santa present.
Do you know what though?
So
we've talked about the successes. I'll talk about a failure in my eyes, and it's staying on the running and the fitness theme. One of the biggest failures I think of the last sort of 5 years has been Under Armour and the purchase of MyFitnessPal, and they've subsequently sold it now for a massive loss. They had obviously. The cynical people out there, maybe myself included, will say, "Well, yeah, but they bought and sold the data rather than the actual." But wow, they had a chance to really create something. I used to go on there. I thought the recipes were terrible. There was no advice on there. It was just really a poor app in a time where digital is like, even I couldn't. I've done a few websites, and I'm absolutely not a web developer, and I'm just thinking. You're MyFitnessPal. You were bought by Under Armour for about $1 billion, and there was so much high hopes. And I used to go on there thinking, "What is this?" It was literally just a food diary, but they had so many chances to actually talk about. And I know they did do recipes. So if there's people listening now saying, "Well, they did do, but they didn't do them very well. They didn't do like workouts very well." You look at the Nike running app. You look at some of the other food trackers, or God, they had a massive opportunity to really kill the content marketing game with that one.
Definitely, and I don't really see the connection between that, because I knew Under Armour owned MyFitnessPal, but never really, saw enough of that. I don't know, so it does suggest they didn't really put as much effort as maybe they could have done. And I find that it's kind of okay. So if I try and parallel this to, we're talking about fitness apps and recipe apps, but there is absolutely the principle applies whichever sector you're working in. So I just see it as being creating and curating original or third-party content that is going to help someone, do what they need to do better and make the right decisions. So like the thing of utility is such a functional word, but actually becoming a utility for your potential audience, your future customers or candidates, employees, is I think a really good approach, because you're basically going, if you come to us, whether you join us or not, whether you buy something from us or not, this is going to be of help to you. And it's natural that we would share this kind of content because we say this about ourselves. The classic thing of how many companies as their values, one of their values would be something around always learning, continually developing, so of course organizations can have the same values, but actually if you take the continuously learning, always developing, then it's natural for maybe an employer to have a bit of a content program for people who have signed up for job alerts, or for employees, which is, okay, we'll take this and we'll help you learn more about yourself, learn more from other people's experience and other people's stories. So I think, we could be talking about running, but that could be applicable to anything at all.
Absolutely.
I think also talk about Tesco. Like another example for me would be like easyJet. When we used to be able to fly, what was in that pocket in front of us and the seat behind us was the magazine.
Yeah.
And you didn't just turn to it and it had ads right off the bat. It was a hello from the editorial team. It was, okay, you're going on holiday. Think about what you can do when you get there, or think about your next trip. And then, of course, the sales messages, the ads were peppered amongst that, rather than starting with the advertising.
Yeah, and the biggest thing as well about those easyJet is I liken it almost to. I know a lot of people say, when was the first content marketing? There's the well documented one is John Deere's The Furrow. But shortly after that was probably my favourite one, which was the Michelin Guide. That is still my favourite piece of content marketing ever. For those who don't know, Michelin tyres wanted people to get out and use their tyres more, because cars, obviously, now we think we want to try and get them off the road. But at that time, there wasn't many cars. So Michelin thought, how do we get people to use their car more and in turn buy their tyres, whilst also putting our brand out there with driving and associated with road trips. So they created the Michelin Guide, where they obviously did hotels and food, and that's where the Michelin stars comes from and stuff now. So that for me is my favourite piece of content marketing.
Yeah.
And easyJet and British Airways and the like as well, they create these magazines and show you a destination. So you might see something and be like, wow, I've never thought about going to Croatia before, but I've just read this article in easyJet, and then they happen to fly to Croatia. So when you go online in a week's time or 3 months' time, so it's all about creating content that encourages people to do something. And I'm sure, like I said, again, for easy, even if they went with Ryanair, then that's because it's a race to the bottom and they've obviously outpriced you. But that's something. But there's always you were the person who put that in their mind, and it's a really strong piece for all of those airlines as well, as you mentioned.
Definitely, and it's I think it's really good, because actually I think for thinking about someone who's considering, okay, well, yeah, I get what content marketing is, and actually I've heard it being talked about before, or okay, well, actually I'm new to it. They can go, well, let's think about what's out there in my day to day, and is that content marketing? So, and actually then see how that can be applied to their own area. So, looking at, if they are finally flying on easyJet, looking at that magazine and going, okay, well, I can get what they're doing here. What could we do if we were to do something like this ourselves? And I think starting starting small is always good. Having something longer term is definitely the plan. But to basically go, right, well, if we are wanting to recruit graduates in tech, because we are, we're not seen as being a recruiter of tech talent, but of course you would be if you were a bank, for example, because so much of what you do is reliant on tech. Then, okay, what content could we create for people that would be, interested in that? What could we create that will help them understand the world of tech more, but also understand, the stories of people in tech, but also just listen to, I hate using the term thought leadership because that suggests that it's only the top brass of individuals in the organization who talk about it. Everyone has an opinion, and it's opinion that basically sells. I think the product is just the byproduct of that. So, having people actually share their opinion about things, package that up together in something, whether it's, online or social, audio, or in print. It's so long as it's at the right stage of that funnel. Well, I like to think of funnels more as pyramids, because you build your everything else on a foundation of awareness. But anyway, that's another episode, I think. But I think there's plenty of examples out there that people can go, okay, well, yeah, that's content marketing. Okay, well, how could we start to use it for ourselves and start using those principles?
And as you mentioned, I mean, I bet now people are doing it even unconsciously. Whether it's I visit BBC Good Food all the time to go and look at how to make different Yorkshire puddings, or how to make different types of gravy or ideas, and that is run by a content agency, and they are creating content on a massive scale, and it's incredible. But to me, if that was somebody now who doesn't understand content marketing, they would just think, oh, that's just a recipe website. But it's kind of, well, it's more than that. that is a draw to do it.
Yeah, and they invest time and money into having that team there because it works. It works for them. Getting people to go to their website, and more traffic will mean a lot to the BBC, and is ultimately providing that utility, isn't it, for somebody?
Absolutely.
It's good to be connected with that feeling. And also, actually talking about BBC, CBeebies, genius, really. Think about it. It's like that is, if you take everything away from it, I think ultimately CBeebies is about having future BBC customers, BBC listeners, viewers. Hey Dougie is just genius. I mean, I've got 2 young toddlers, so they love Hey Dougie, and I think Hey Dougie's brilliant because they've got stuff in there for the adults as well. So many cultural references, it's brilliant. But my point is that CBeebies is actually, I can just imagine, I'm sure I read about this anyway, is looking at, right, okay, well, what can we provide, our future, long stay, customers, our audience, and CBeebies content is part of that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think an example, not just throwing examples at you, but an example like that, I think, is one of my favourites over the last couple of years was the Land Rover podcast, and it was called the Discovery Series, and that was kind of where the branding finished. It wasn't called the Land Rover podcast; it was called Discovery Series, and it was. And funny enough, we were talking about binaural sound a little while ago, and what they did is they created this podcast which was for a family. So when you jump in the car, you put the podcast on, and it uses the whole speakers from the car, and not just a Land Rover, obviously whatever car you're in. But they make, I think, maybe 2 or 3 references to Land Rover, the brand, in the whole series. And that to me is like, even from if I was a 4 or 5-year-old, young boy of myself, kind of listening to that, I'd be like, I now associate Land Rover with Discovery and with exploring the UK, and I thought that was a perfect example of a podcast for me, a branded podcast, I should say.
Absolutely, and I think it's great to be kind of like this, what we're doing here, which is throwing out examples there, because I kind of want people who are listening to go, okay, I'm going to look at that, I'm going to go onto Google, search for that, and just start to see, because it's start to see what that looks like, and again how that can be applied to to what they do. There's plenty of examples out there. Actually, you've got quite a few case studies on your website. So what I'll do is I'll drop in links into the episode description so that people can take a look. We've touched on the kind of ROI thing a little bit. I think we could spend a little bit of time on that in terms of ROI. It's obviously, understandably, some of the classic thing that someone will say, okay, well, what return is content marketing going to give me? When your members have had those conversations, and you've had those conversations with members, and in the circles you have, typically, kind of, what does ROI look like for the people using content marketing?
Well, I think an uplift in sales is what everyone would say, and I think that's what a lot of marketing PR, I think that's what a lot of it will sort of go back to is that. But I think the biggest thing with measurement with content is about getting it right from the start. What are the KPIs? What are you looking to do? Are you looking to increase traffic? Are you looking to increase dwell time, sign-ups? Because these are all things that content can do. As we mentioned with the BBC Good Food, if they can see, they can compare like for like in terms of web traffic. So if their goal is to get that more eyeballs on that, that's a completely, because they know that people will then sign up to the BBC Good Food magazine. I'm sure they've got statistics on that. But I think they're obviously they will have revenue goals. But I think from speaking to people and from the conversations that we've had in our webinars, it's really being upfront with, what do you want? And again, we all know content marketing isn't always on. It's a kind of, it's a long-term plan, a vision. It's something you should always be doing. Going back to the Michelin guide, I mean, that was like 1902 or something that started, and they're still doing it now. It's John Deere's The Furrow is still going on now, just because of the two examples we mentioned. So I think it's absolutely key that you set a good KPI from the start. And I suppose that goes for any type of brief rather than not just content marketing. But I think getting the KPI nailed down from the start. What do you want? Do you want to have more? And do you know what actually there was one example given to us in a webinar, which was a fashion brand, and they were actually using content marketing to try and decrease the number of returns. So they had a sort of hypothesis that if you got served an ad on Instagram, you swiped up and bought it, you kind of you weren't very invested, you kind of bought it, I might return it. So they were thinking, right, and this was the start of their sort of hypothesis. So they haven't sort of gone down the outcome yet. But what they thought and what they seem to think would happen is, if they start putting sales through from people who have visited the sort of the content they produce, then those people would actually have thought about it a bit more, and then thus having the returns at less returns, which of course is better for the business because they don't have to deal with all those returns. So that was their sort of KPI, was actually to try and lower the amount of returns they get. So there's so many things that you can be, but I do think revenue is always going to be one. And I think measuring that, of course. But again, if you're going to measure it, you can't measure it in 3 or 6 months' time. It's got to be year on year going forward, and it's almost something you have to. Again, I would say this because of my position and who I kind of work for, but content marketing has grown massively. It's been around for years, as we've mentioned the examples, but it's grown massively. And as the sales cycle slows down, as it has, not just because of the pandemic, but people are, and I don't mean impulse buys, that hasn't slowed down. People shopping on Instagram, that's sped up, if anything. But people now, there's so much research you can do now, I bet you there's people who 15 years ago used to walk into Curry's to go and buy a TV, and they'd go and chat to someone. Now, I bet the Curry's salespeople are kind of like, right, oh, hi, Chris, you want to buy a TV? Yeah, I've already done all my research. I've been on Which, I've been on Amazon, I've been on Richer Sounds, I've done all my research. I want that one, and I don't want to pay that much. It's incredible, like how now you have to create content. Everyone has to, for an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we talk about ROI, you say, okay, uplifting sales is ultimately the goal, isn't it? Otherwise, really, what is the point? So there's got to be a commercial outcome there. I think from an employer marketing recruitment perspective, it's going to be hires. Now, okay, actually, but we know it's going to be more than that. Of course, tracking it is going to be not so straightforward. It's not just about sticking a pixel on an individual and then seeing how they contribute to the business as they go on. But actually, true return on investment really is going to be about someone joining an organization, staying there, but also staying there and adding absolute value to the bottom line, which is quite difficult. So yes, there's that, but also I think there's a thing about, it goes to what you're talking about in terms of really understanding what your objectives are. And that is, okay, well, actually, this campaign is going to be about generating signups. That could be subscriptions to, regular updates, whether it's, about, food guide, or it's about innovation, because there's an employer that talks about how innovation is really, truly fundamental to their existence. So actually, okay, let's use this campaign to actually generate traffic to the site, but also to convert signups. It doesn't have to always be connected straight away to the goal, which is sales or quality applications or applications. And I think that's why talking about funnels and talking about pyramids is important. I think sometimes they're talked about without really understanding that you don't have to achieve all of those things in one go. And actually going, let's do this campaign, and actually look, if actually we are generating as much, if not more, traffic to a website than we would if we were paying someone to advertise with them, then fantastic, let's do it. So yeah, the ROI thing is definitely nuanced, isn't it? That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you learn as well, as in from a company. We can talk about internal comms and internal content in a second, but I think if you're getting 1,000 visitors a month, and then you start doing a content marketing campaign, as in a campaign for a year or 18 months. So it is a campaign, but it's so always on. So after 18 months, if not, all of a sudden you've got 6,000 visits instead of 1,000, and they are from your target audience, and your sales haven't gone up, then you can kind of look at, well, why haven't they? It's got that we thought that our sales would go up, but now are you too expensive? Are you too old? Are you too outdated? There is these things where you can look at that as well. If you thought sales would go up when you got all these new people in, which again it probably would, but if it didn't, if you increased your visits by 300% and your sales didn't go up, then that might be a bit of research or a bit of a sign really that there's something else you have to do. Maybe you haven't got enough content on there to push people to actually buy it now. So I think it's only a good thing really.
It's very true actually, because it's, if someone, let's say a campaign is run and it's like, well, we didn't get many sales from it.
Do you know what? I'll give you an example from my real life.
To blame the video. You're going to go on.
Yeah. No, I'll give you an example from my real life. I've recently bought a hot tub, like an inflatable one.
Nice.
And all of the research and stuff I did was from how to do the chemicals and all that kind of stuff. I was reading all that stuff, and again, this might not just be content marketing, but to illustrate a point, I was looking at Jacuzzi's website. And Jacuzzi, for those who don't know, is actually a brand. It's not a type of hot tub. It's a brand, Jacuzzi. And I was looking at all the stuff on there. But they start at 20 grand, their hot tubs do. And so they could give me the absolute best service ever. They could teach me everything I need to know about hot tubs. But unfortunately for me, I can't afford a jacuzzi. So I then took that knowledge that they gave me and bought a much cheaper one. But the point still stands. I mean, if I ever was fortunate enough to afford one, then I definitely would. But I think that is the type of thing where that is kind of what people need to realize as well. You can give people all the content they need in the world and all the desire, but at the end of the day, there are still other factors which are out of your control.
Exactly, a customer now or a customer later on.
Absolutely.
That customer's only going to be there in like months or years' time. There's frustration of salespeople going, it's too long to wait. Partly maybe connected to sales incentives and all that stuff, end of my quarter, etc. That kind of thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's a shame to kind of land the return purely on one piece of content or a series of content. So if a video is done and they say, well, we didn't get many sales from that, it would be unfair just to purely, it's easy to point towards something that was done for that marketing campaign, but actually it could well be that the e-commerce part of the website is just horrendous. And actually your experience is terrible. So after a few clicks, you're like, it's just not worth it. could be the absolute gold in terms of content. But if that experience drops off the cliff, I've actually seen it with like a massive a massive brand in in the drink space, where actually they lovely video, lovely microsite, but then when you go to apply, it changes totally. It's like, well, okay, will people stay there? Well, if it's a good experience, then they will, but it changed so dramatically. So I think looking at the point of purchase experience and looking at or in the case of the recruitment world, looking at the applicant tracking, the online application process and system, if there's an issue with that, then or that could be contributing to the number of applications, or in terms of actually getting quality, and actually maybe it's the content post application that needs to be looked at, because that's as important, if not more important, than the content before someone applies or before someone purchases something. Because if someone applies and they're a quality customer, if they purchase something, they're a quality customer, then actually you want to keep them. and so therefore your content has to work harder. So I think it's not smoke and mirrors. The stuff you're talking about is actually going, to look at the ROI, you need to look at a number of things, and you need to break it down and go, what role does it have at a certain stage in a life cycle of a purchase process.
And also going back to the employment sort of way as well. It's like, your goal would be, I see a lot of our members now, massive agencies who, not unfortunately, but unfortunately because of the time it takes and they can't take them all on, but they get hundreds of applications every month from people. And there's a reason why they do, because they are who they are. They're the biggest around. So when people leave university, they type in PR agency or ad agency or whoever it may be, and they'll go for the big ones. And I'm not sure if you had one, Chris, but when I left school, my goal, I wanted to work for Land Rover. I loved Land Rover, nice. And I really wanted to work for Land Rover. And I think, you could ask me why, and there might have been so many different factors and stuff. But if you can be a brand now that attracts people to want to work for you, it might not be, you might get them when they're 12 or 13 because they've listened to a podcast or read a magazine. But in 5, 6, 7 years' time, which I'm guessing a lot of companies still want to be around in 10 years and 20 years and 50 years, you can get people to try. And again, I know there'll be people listening to this going, but no one wants to work for us because we're dull or we're boring. But there's dull and boring people out there. You know what I mean? There's someone for every job. And I think it'd be so great if people, they could do, and I think people do want it. We're talking about Gen Z now. I think it's all the research is pointing towards that. They want to just work for a company that they can align themselves with. And I think, I'm not sure about, people's parents when they're listening now, but my parents have both had the same job. They're retired now, both had the same job for like 30 odd years. So they've done different positions within that job, but they've worked for the same company for 35, 36 years. Wow. Whereas, I've had like 4 jobs, and I think I think that's happening now. A lot of people used to be, you get a job, you're secure, you stay in it. And again, I'm not in the recruitment business, so I might be wildly wrong. But usually in marketing, I think 2.5 years is like a time where people then usually move on. 2.5 years is usually like a pretty, from anecdotally from people I speak to, that's kind of 2.5, 3 years is when people move on. So people aren't sticking around as much anymore. And I think Gen Z, the people who are leaving university now, I think they are going to be looking at, who do I want to work for? I've got a choice now. It's not just find a job and settle down and I'll be here for 35 years. You've got to get people to actually want to be there. And then once they're there, you've got to be able to keep them there.
Exactly. And even if it is like where there's, even if employers have more, I suppose, even if it's more of an employer's market where actually there's people who are really desperate to get jobs, it's still an issue of making sure the right people actually apply. It's right for the organisation, it's right for the individual, because to actually get the wrong person into an organisation is very costly. Yeah. As kind of the top of my podcast, I introduced it, I said that finding and keeping the right talent is the number one problem facing organisations. I might be slightly biased, but I fundamentally believe that's the case, because ultimately it's the people in the organisation that provide that experience, that sell the products with that service, service for product or physical product. So you've got to make sure you get the right people on board. And even if you've got the likes of Apple and Tesla and the brands that people go, oh, fantastic, I want to work for them, they still have an issue of getting the right people. I imagine they would love to have really half the number of applications and twice the quality. And there's a job there to be done. So whether you're struggling to get that awareness, and you love to be like the Facebooks and the Apples and the Teslas of the world, the big brands of the world, actually, there's a job to do. And if you are the big brands of the world, there's still a job to do, is to make sure you get the right people. And actually those relationships with employer brands, the organizations you're working for, can last a lifetime. Your career lasts a long time. We're in work for a long time. So actually someone can go, come back. And especially I think over this decade, and we're going to see more of a model of people having more of those kind of portfolio type careers. Obviously we're not talking about all jobs here, but there's roles out, jobs out there that will be, well, actually I'm going to work for that company for a bit, go somewhere else, and then come back. So have companies have this, like, I've heard it being described as a talent bench, a bit like this football analogy of having a bench of substitutes that you can dip into as and when you need to, when the game demands it. So yeah, I think I would say this because I'm in it, but I think content in the employer branding, employer marketing spaces is really important to get the right people in, but also to keep them as well. And we could talk about internal comms and how important that is, but I'll say that's for another episode.
Yeah.
You've got. Oh, go on.
No, I was just going to say, and I think it's really important to note as well. And yes, it might be a little bit more difficult, but if there's people listening now thinking, yeah, but we're a furniture company in some town in England or something, and we only want to attract people from a local pool. It doesn't mean you still can't do that. There's stuff you can do in your local area. So it's not just, you don't have to be, we don't create electric cars and we don't have a billionaire philanthropist who can go on Twitter and create a storm. There's horses for courses, and if you are looking for people in your local area, like I'll give an example. I'm from Swansea, as you might be able to tell from my accent, and if you're looking to hire people from Swansea, there's things you can do to help build your brand through content marketing and help build your sort of, will people want to come and work for you because of what you do in the local area and stuff. So I don't think there's anyone out there who can say, oh, well, we haven't got that, so what are we going to write about? What content can we create? Because there is always something. And I think that's one of the biggest things people have sometimes think with, oh, we are a boring company, or we make transistors for something. Well, there are people who are interested in transistors, and you wouldn't want someone who's not interested in them. If you created some kind of like beach guide and had all these influencers, you're not going to get the right people for transistors here.
Absolutely. Actually, when you talked about the furniture manufacturer in, say, Swansea, is actually, so like Heineken, for example, I saw something yesterday where, obviously because of April the 12th, lockdown being lifted a little bit more, being able to go out and have a drink outside and being able to get your hair cut, Heineken did a bar buzz. So is this, this little barber shop on wheels, and you could get a drink as well. So okay, well that's Heineken. Well, they would do that, but actually, the furniture manufacturer in Swansea could do something like that. Not have a barbers, but think, okay, well, given the lockdown, is there a relevance to what we do? And actually, okay, so it could be right. So we make furniture. Okay, there we go. We're going to provide a space outside where you can sit down, and we're going to give you some free drinks, and you can chill out. Oh, we just happen to make these super comfy pieces of furniture you're sitting on. So
there's so much.
Back to your point, is absolutely accessible. Definitely.
Yeah.
We just need to find that furniture company in Swansea and sell the idea to them.
Got all these ideas, just call up random people. Go, I've got this idea for you to create like a little seating area outside of barbers.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've got a podcast yourself coming out soon, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's called A Coffee with the CMA, and it's been something we've wanted to do for a good while. A lot of people have been asking us, our members and things, and unlike what some people think, and I know I alluded to it earlier, some people, luckily they haven't said this, but there's been a lot of people who talk about there's too many podcasts out there, and I completely disagree, because it's, as I said earlier, nobody says that about films or books or stop. Hey BBC, we've had enough of your TV now. Can you just stop making TV for a couple of years? There's enough of it now. There's enough police dramas out there, and I think, yeah, we finally kind of locked it down. We've recorded a couple of sessions now, and to be honest, it's basically just a very informal chat, really. It's me chatting to people from the content industry about where it's been, where it's going, what they do, and I think maybe because of the pandemic, it's also been a bit of a bit looser as well. So a lot of people, they only get to chat to their colleagues or their family. So the kind of idea behind a coffee with the CMA is you sit down with me and a guest, and you pop your headphones in or whack us on the speaker, and it's kind of like, I just sat down for half an hour and I feel like I know Rob and the guest a little bit more, and I understand this a bit more. So that was the kind of thinking behind it. I mean, yeah, nice. When it launches in this summer, we'll see if it actually hit the mark.
Well, it's lovely you've set it up, and what I'll do is I'll when you've got it up and running, I'll definitely make sure I share it, and I'll drop it into this episode when it's available. For sure. And actually, people can sign up for your webinars as well. You still have a whole raft of webinars going on after your 160 plus that you are to date so far. So I'll drop in a link to that so people can sign up. And I think it's just really worth signing up so that they get these webinar invites dropping into their inbox. And also just to then go to the website, CMA website, and just look at the case studies there. I'll drop a link to the case studies in actually the episode description, just so that people can just start, whether they know content marketing, I've heard it a lot. I want to start to see examples, or start to see how I can apply it to my own organisation. Or whether you don't know it at all, I think the CMA website definitely has plenty to offer. So yeah, I'll make sure the link's in there. But yeah, thanks for the chat, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, no, it's been great to join you, and it looks like you're going for a run now. So I hope the weather's staying nice where you are. It's lovely where I am. So hope you enjoy your run as well.
I'll go and put some clothes on.
Please do.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed what you heard, then please feel free to subscribe, and it would be awesome if you could leave a review as well. It really does help.